Hello and welcome to my channel, The Orchid Hut. My name is Dana and thank you for watching one of my orchid videos today. This one is going to be an orchid medley chit chat where I simply bring you a variety of random orchids from my collection and we kind of step through them one by one and just talk about what's going on with the orchid, what am I noticing, how am I taking care of it. It could be just about anything, a very, very random video. So let's go ahead and get started. Today I have 6 orchids that I have chosen for the medley chit chat. 2 of them are Latoria type dendrobiums, so that's where we're going to start. I'm going to move a couple of these others out of the way so that the camera can focus on the ones we're talking about right now. And the first one that I want to show you is my Roy Tokunaga, Latoria type dendrobium. And I purchased this one a couple of months ago now in full bloom. And these blooms have just lasted and lasted and lasted. A gorgeous orchid. I really like this one in my bay window because it's tall and it doesn't take up a lot of space from left to right, but the blooms, kind of do stand above all of the other plants, and it really is just a joy to look at. The other great thing about this orchid is that, as I'm turning it sideways here, you can see the tallest cane actually has 2 new bloom spikes coming out the top of the plant. So this one had 2 really, really full blooms, probably for the fall and winter of the season. And so now the 2 that are happening right here will be for the spring and the summer. So this one is a year-round bloomer, I think, which is, another bonus for an orchid is to, be able to have it be blooming year-round. And this seems to be typical, at least for the Latoria type dendrobiums in my collection, because my little green apples dendrobium has a flush of blooms primarily in the fall, but it does also bloom in the spring and in the summer, just not with quite as many, blooms, but still very, very nice to look at year-round. Okay, so that's Roy Tokunaga. All right, and then the other Latoria type dendrobium that I want to show you is my Maiden Charlotte, and I'll be putting a link in the upper right hand corner of the screen. I recently repotted this one and I just wanted to show you how it's doing since then. When I repotted it, I noticed maybe 2 or 3 new growths from the base of the plant, and that was several weeks ago now. And as I look down at the bottom of the plant now, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 new growths. So the new growths are continuing, which is great. And when I repotted it, I could tell that the new little root nubbins were not far behind the new growths. So I'm assuming, even though it's covered up by the bark now, that all of the new roots for those new growths are also getting started and sending themselves down into that new media, which will make for a great growing condition and a well-timed repotting for this orchid. I am going to be growing all of my Latoria type dendrobiums in the bay window this year. I'm going to try them that way to see if they do well as intermediate type growers with a good eastern exposure for light, and see if I can still get them to bloom that way. I'm going to be doing a little bit of rearranging when I put some of my orchids outdoors this year. And one of the changes I'm making is keeping all of my Latoria type dendrobiums inside with my Phalaenopsis, but maybe a little bit closer to the window. Okay, so that's the 2 Latoria type dendrobiums. Now the next one that I want to show you is the Catacetum type orchid that I repotted a while back, and I'll also put a link in the upper right hand corner to the repotting of this Catacetum. It was a process. This is a Fred Clark hybrid After Dark, And right here is the new growth, and so you can tell if you've been watching my previous videos that that growth is getting larger very slowly, but day by day getting larger. And I'm going to insert a still photo in the video right now. If I very, very gently lift up on this plant, you can see all of the new roots from this new growth headed down towards the media. Now, I need a big do not disturb sign on this orchid because you really don't want to mess with those root tips. So I'm not going to be fussing with it anymore, and I'm just going to trust that those new roots are well on their way down into the media. This is one that is not getting water at all until those roots are well down here, and it may be May before that happens. Okay, so that one is doing well. And the next one that I wanted to share with you was the Phalaenopsis orchid that I put in a community post a few days ago. If you'd like to go back and look at it, look for the community tab from the channel page, and you'll see a picture of this Phalaenopsis. This is my friend's princess. And I really did not expect this one to bloom this year because I purchased it last year, and it came with damaged leaves that had to be cut because of heat damage. It had 2 bloom spikes on it. By the time I got around to repotting it from the awful sphagnum moss, the plant was a little bit stressed, but lo and behold, it is sending up a new spike right here, and this is truly a Phalaenopsis anomaly because even though the bloom spike is appearing 2 leaves down, so in the joint between the leaves, 2 leaves down, the anomaly is that there was already a bloom spike here. This was the one that I cut off right before I repotted it. And typically Phalaenopsis orchids do not send up another bloom spike in a space where there has already been one. So very unusual. This orchid is determined to bloom, so I'm going to go ahead and let it complete that process, at least until all of the buds open. And some sign of new root growth right here. And let's see, a little bit of new root growth happening right here. So this one, you know, is doing much better than I expected, given what it's been through. And there's one other thing that I wanted to mention about watering my orchids this time of year. You know, at the end of every month, my pattern is that I flush all of my orchids twice for 2 waterings in a row. And so that happened at the end of February. And so the last 2 or 3 days I've been going through the cycle of watering all of my orchids for the first time in March. And I decided that every single orchid would have a little bit of light feed. Unless, of course, it's the Catacetum type orchid, which should not be watered at all, or if I actually do not see any kind of signs of new growth yet, then I just gave that orchid plain water. But most of my orchids, I would say, gosh, 85% of them are either working on blooming, they're working on growing new growth, or they're working on developing roots. I only have maybe just a handful of orchids that still are not responding to the start of the growing season. So those I did not fertilize yet, but all of the others I did. I gave a very, very weak fertilizer to, because they need that energy to either finish producing their blooms, or to really jumpstart the root growth, or to speed up, complete some of the leaf growth that was slowly progressing over the winter months. So, you know, this orchid got a little bit of light feed because it takes a lot of energy to develop that bloom spike. Okay, so next up is going to be my 2 Oncidium type orchids. And the first one that I'm going to show you is a no ID Oncidium orchid. It's kind of the standard looking yellow dancing lady orchid. And I'll put a link for when I repotted this one last year. It was a difficult repot because the new growth on this orchid tends to want to be vertical instead of horizontal. So each new growth is sort of climbing upwards. And this was the new growth for last year. And I was trying desperately to get it close enough to the media so that most of the new roots could work themselves down into the media instead of being air roots. This little tiny one right here looks like it still may be headed towards the media. This one may be a bit wayward and turn out to be more of an air root, but that's okay. I was successful with getting most of those roots to head into the media. So because this is the new growth, where I will be looking for a bloom spike a bit later is on the side of the pseudobulb with the larger leaf. So if this orchid is going to bloom, it will be right here in this space between the pseudobulb and the larger leaf here on the side. So nothing in there yet, but I'm keeping a close eye. Okay, and then finally, another Oncidium type orchid. This is an intergeneric hybrid, but this is the one that I completely repotted at the wrong time. The pseudobulbs have been shriveled because of that, and although the plant has not died, it hasn't really thrived either. I was really concerned that I might have done this one in. The new growth is a bit misshapen because of, I believe, dehydration. The older part of the root system was not able to keep it hydrated while it was developing. And then, of course, the new root growth from this new pseudobulb was a bit delayed, and so it couldn't hydrate itself that way either. But all is not lost, and great news, great news. There is new root growth now coming from that new growth, and it'll be heading down into the media and will be able to support the plant. So there's, not quite sure if the camera can catch that, but right above my fingers there's quite a few new roots. And then you should be able to see these right here. And in addition to that, you can even see a little bit of new root growth under the media. So this one also now getting a little bit of fertilizer to help that root development. Okay, so that's the end of my 6 orchids for today's orchid medley chit chat. I really hope you enjoyed this video or learned something new. And if you did, please hit that thumbs up button. It helps the channel grow. It helps me continue to bring you more orchid videos. And the subscribe button will be coming up in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Talk to you next time.